Have you been keeping up with training camp for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Because if you haven't, I'm here to give you the latest updates when it comes to Pittsburgh Steelers training camp. And first of all, we got to talk about George Pickens, man. This dude has been the MVP of training camp for the Steelers. He's been embarrassing every single defender that he's been matched up against, including stud rookie Joey Porter Jr. And although Joey Porter Jr. has gotten the better of George Pickens on a couple of occasions, George Pickens has pretty much been picking on Joey Porter Jr. all training camp. And Mike Tomlin has been intentionally pitting Joey Porter Jr. and George Pickens against each other in these 1v1 drills, especially when it comes to them running routes against each other, or George Pickens having to run routes against Joey Porter Jr. You got to remember that Joey Porter Jr. was one of the most physical cornerbacks coming out of this past year's draft, man. Very good in man coverage, very good in press coverage. And you pair him against George Pickens, who is very physical in his own right, has great size and incredible physicality. This was one of the most anticipated matchups that I've been waiting for all offseason prior to training camp starting, and I haven't been disappointed. You expect George Pickens to be getting the most of Joey Porter Jr. because he's a rookie. George Pickens is going into year 2. He's been making hella contested catches. The knock on him has been that he hasn't been creating a lot of separation, but George Pickens wasn't known for his route running coming out, and he wasn't known for being a elite separator. And that's not what Pittsburgh needs him to be. Pittsburgh just needs him to be able to catch those contested passes and make a lot of big plays in the vertical passing game downfield. If you're looking for somebody who's going to be elite at creating separation and running phenomenal routes, look at Deontay Johnson for that. That's what they have him for. George Pickens has been a superstar so far for the Steelers in training camp, and he pretty much has given a lot of people a lot of ammunition to why he's going to end up being one of the better wide receivers in the NFL this year, and why everybody has them, or has George Pickens, on their breakout candidates list, man. This dude has been a man amongst boys in training camp for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he's been the best player who's been making the most noise in training camp so far for Pittsburgh. The offense, outside of George Pickens, has been pretty solid. Kenny Pickett in his second season under Matt Canada has made some pretty big strides. Now, Kenny Pickett hasn't been dominating, but he hasn't been bad. He's been pretty good, as a matter of fact. He looks more comfortable in the pocket. There are people who are saying that he has more command over the offense. He's more confident. And the wide receivers that he's been throwing to have also helped him look really good. Allen Robinson has been making a lot of big plays. Calvin Austin in his second season has been really good as well. And Calvin Austin is somebody who we got to give the award to most underrated performer in camp so far. He's made a couple of big plays, some of them coming against rookie corner Joey Porter Jr. Calvin Austin, he probably won't start over Allen Robinson. There is a position battle for the starting slot receiver job. Allen Robinson probably has that on lock, but Calvin Austin is somebody who probably is going to be involved on jet sweeps. Maybe he can get the ball on some trick plays, screen passes in the open field. Calvin Austin is, even though he's undersized, he's really good after the catch. He's really nimble, has really explosive acceleration. He can go from 0 to 100 in the snap of a finger. So Calvin Austin has been really good so far for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's been the most underrated performer in all of training camp for the Steelers. But what about this offensive line, though? That's been the biggest question about the Steelers going into this season. And I got some bad news for you guys, man. This offensive line hasn't really been having a great day against the defensive line, man. They didn't really have a good day against the defensive line in the past practice that they just had. And overall, throughout the majority of training camp, the defensive line has gotten the better of this offensive line. And then particularly the edge rushers against the offensive tackles, man. TJ Watt, rookie Nick Herberg, Alex Highsmith have been absolutely outstanding in training camp for the Steelers, especially Alex Highsmith. And it's a little surprising because Alex Highsmith just signed a really lucrative extension. But it's like Alex Highsmith has a chip on his shoulder. He has something to prove. I guess he feels like everybody's paying all this attention to TJ Watt, but nobody's talking about the fact that I had 14 sacks last season. Alex Highsmith has been phenomenal. And when it comes to these offensive tackles, man, Broderick Jones, rookie out of Georgia, the Steelers' first-round pick from this past year's draft, he doesn't look ready to start. And I'm not concerned about it. I'm just a little bit disappointed because I was hoping that maybe Broderick Jones was getting a little bit over-criticized and over-critiqued. There are players that come out of the draft every year that are really good, but they just get nitpicked to hell and they get over criticized and then they turn out being really good day one. But Broderick Jones, though, he kind of has been what you expected. Really athletic, a mauler in the run game, but pass protection has been really shaky. And not just Broderick Jones, but Dan Moore, he hasn't really looked good. There were some people saying that he has improved, but judging from the majority of articles that I've read, he hasn't been all that better neither. And when it comes to who's going to end up starting at left tackle, it's going to take the preseason and probably then some to decide who's going to end up starting their week one against the 49ers, because it doesn't look like there's any separation being created at all. And the other right tackle position with Chuck Okorafor, he kind of has struggled a little bit as well. The offensive guards haven't struggled as much as the offensive tackles, but the defensive line has gotten the better of them as well. And guys on the defensive line who have really been making their presence felt, you already know about Cam Hayward, but do you know about Martravius Adams? Rookie Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin, Isaiah Loudermilk. There is a lot of talent on this Steelers defensive line. And the sad thing about this is that one of these guys may not end up making the roster. There's going to be one player that ends up not making this team that's going to be picked up by another team, and he's going to be a great addition. Now, I don't know who's going to end up getting cut, who's not going to make this team. I'm not somebody who does 53-man roster projections or predictions, but all of these defensive linemen on the interior have looked very impressive, and this offensive line, man, they've been getting beasted and feasted on throughout the majority of training camp up to this point for the Steelers. Now, I don't think this means that the offensive line hasn't improved at all. I think that this means more that the Steelers' defensive line is one of the best in the NFL, and people seem to forget that the Steelers have always had one of the NFL's best defensive lines for over the last couple of years. So, I'm kind of not surprised. I'm just a little bit let down, because even though you know that you're going up against a really good defensive line, you will hope that there will be more instances of this offensive line being able to show a little bit more fight against the defensive line. You don't really want to hear your defensive line just completely overpowering your offensive line the majority of days that you have training camp. You would like to have the offensive line having a good stretch or a couple of days where they're kind of imposing their will on the defensive line. So it kind of makes it hard to evaluate just how much the offensive line has improved, because you don't know if the offensive line is still a problem or if the defensive line is just that freaking good. And the problem with this situation is that we already know that the defensive line is just that good, but you're wondering if the offensive line is going to take some jumps in improvement compared to how they performed over the last couple of years. So it's kind of hard to tell that when you have the defensive line and all these players stepping up, making their presence felt. And another issue that still lingers for the Pittsburgh Steelers has been the fact that pass coverage from the linebacker position pretty much is still a big concern. Last year, you couldn't get any solid pass coverage out of Miles Jack and whoever else you had back there at linebacker. And the same thing can be said about the group of linebackers that you have on your roster right now. Cole Holcomb, you recently signed. Quan Alexander. All the linebackers have pretty much been getting cooked by the running backs and 1v1 pass coverage drills, man. And Landon Roberts, he's been getting cooked. Quan Alexander, he's been really impressive against the run, but when it comes to pass coverage, I guess that's not really his strong suit. And Cole Holcomb, I thought one thing about him that would make him a big addition to the Steelers defense was what he was going to bring from a pass coverage standpoint. But the running backs, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, those guys have been going off against these linebackers. They've been beasting and feasting on these guys in coverage. So that's a big concern. And the reason why this concerns me and why I don't really think that this is going to improve all that much throughout training camp is because your linebackers aren't asked to guard these running backs and receivers and coverage a lot of times. Okay, majority of times when you have a running back like Najee Harris coming out of the backfield, you kind of want to have a safety keying in on him. Anytime you have a linebacker in coverage, you're not going to find too many great coverage linebackers in the league. You're not going to have a linebacker that's just going to be a leader lights out in coverage too often. You're just hoping for your linebackers to at least be serviceable in that department. But the Pittsburgh Steelers linebackers, they haven't even looked like that in coverage so far throughout training camp. Jalen Warren, Najee, they've been going off against these linebackers anytime they match up against them and 1v1 drills when it comes to getting open on these passing routes, man. These running backs, either they are really good at running routes and getting open in the passing game, or these linebackers, man, just still suck when it comes to their ability to contribute to the pass defense, man. So it looks like, once again, it may be another season where the Steelers struggle to get much from their linebackers and pass coverage. Now, the secondary has been really shaky, but it hasn't been because there's no talent or guys are underperforming. It's been due to the injury bug that the Steelers have caught. Minkah Fitzpatrick, KZ, Keanu Neal have been banged up throughout training camp. But the positive thing about that is that it's led to some guys getting some opportunities who've really been able to take advantage of it. Safety Kenny Robinson has been getting a lot of reps with the first team defense, and he's been making his presence felt. He's caught a couple of interceptions. He's been pretty good against the run. So I think that Kenny Robinson has pretty much solidified his spot on this roster. And I think at this point, he pretty much is competing for some legitimate playing time. You got Trey Norwood there, who also has made a couple of plays. But Kenny Robinson, if we're talking about standout players up to this point in camp, you got to mention his name. You got guys who are missing time with injury, and you have a guy in Kenny Robinson who's making his presence felt, making the most of his opportunities. Standout players throughout training camp for the Pittsburgh Steelers up to this point. We got to start off with Darnell Washington. There were not a lot of great things being said about Darnell Washington after week 1 in training camp, but once we got the pads on and the chin straps got buckled on the helmet, this is where Darnell Washington started to make his presence felt. And Darnell Washington isn't one of those shorts and tank tops kind of players, man. He's not going to look good in those. He's a true football player, man. You put those pads on and you blow that first whistle and start the game, this dude is a monster. He's 6'7", 264 pounds, and he's been really good when it comes to run blocking. As a matter of fact, he's been so good in run blocking that he also has gotten the better of TJ Watt in that department. TJ Watt, anytime he has anytime he has Darnell Washington blocking him, he kind of hasn't been able to have that big of an impact. And not just has Darnell Washington been a force in run blocking, but he also has been a force in the passing game. There was one clip when he was running a 1v1 route against one linebacker, and he just absolutely destroyed him. And there were some people who were asking, how fast just is this guy? Because he doesn't really look all that fast. Well, the reason for this is because you got to remember, this is a huge colossal behemoth of a tight end. He's 6'7", 264 pounds. So anytime you have somebody that has this kind of length and this kind of size, it's going to kind of look like they're pacing or jogging out there. But if you see that thing in live action, that shit looks scary, fam. And if you see Darnell Washington running a seam up the middle, if you're Kenny Pickett, you throw that thing up. It doesn't matter if he's guarded or double team, man. He's one of those guys that you just got to throw that rock up and let him go get that thing, man, because there are not too many defensive backs in this league who are going to be able to beat Darnell Washington in 50-50 ball situations. How many safeties honestly have the kind of physicality to defend against Darnell Washington? How many linebackers even have the kind of skills the guard against a Darnell Washington in coverage? This dude is a mismatch. It doesn't matter who you put up against Darnell Washington. The matchup still is kind of in his favor. You want to put a safety against him? Okay, he's 6'7", 264 pounds. You want to put a linebacker against him? He's more athletic than the majority of linebackers you're going to put up against him. Darnell Washington is a monster, man. And I'm so excited to see what he does when the Steelers play their first preseason game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, man. I cannot wait to see this guy. I get he's not a great route runner. Who cares? That's what you got Pat Freiermuth, man. It's crazy that the same knocks that people have about George Pickens, people are making these same, statements when it comes to Darnell Washington. You don't always have to be a great route runner. Just because you're a receiver or a tight end, if you are somebody who is physical and you can go up and win contested balls and be a good red zone target, then you're going to be able to still be effective. You don't got to have elite route running. There are different traits that different players have that make them stand out from one another. Not every single player is regarded the best at their position because they have similar things in common. Everybody has a particular skill set that makes them thrive and succeed. And looking at how Darnell Washington has been utilized in training camp so far, they're not asking him to go out there and run every single route on the route tree. They're asking him to run simple routes, seam routes, wheel routes, whatever routes that aren't too complicated, just to find ways to get him involved in the deep passing game, man. You got somebody with this size and athleticism, you don't need him to be extremely nuanced, man. You just need to find a way to throw him the football. Now, somebody else who has been really impressing me has been Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren, I think that he's going to end up having a bigger impact on this offense than what some Steelers fans may expect. I thought he was really good during the second half of last season. He has great hands catching the football out of the backfield, and he has a lot of juice when he gets the football. He's one of those guys that you give him the football, and he's a threat to take it to the house every single time. I think that he's faster and has more acceleration than Najee Harris. Najee Harris is the better overall back. But if you're looking for a good scat back and a good change of pace back, I definitely think that Jaylen Warren is your guy. Anthony McFarland also has been making some waves. Now, we know about Anthony McFarland. He always gets a lot of hype going into training camp, but then when the pads come on, he kind of disappears. But he's been making some good plays in the passing game. He also has had a couple of decent runs also. So we're going to see if he ends up being that RB3 on this team and if he ends up getting a little bit of some work this season behind Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. This is it for my Steelers training camp update, man. Let me know if there are some things that I missed. If you've been in attendance during Pittsburgh Steelers training camp, let me know some of your observations that you have down in the comment section down below.